a year and a half ago when I started my core community. There's a bunch of you that's done core challenges. Who here has done a core challenge? Woohoo! Yes, yes. All right, so when we started our core challenges, my intention of doing the Connect with Caro was almost as a bonus to the community, because I wanted to leverage all these amazing people that I surround myself with, experts in their field and friends of mine that I admire, that I trust, that I consider my teachers. And the very first expert that I ever had for Connect with Caro is actually here in the back, and it's Neat with Nick over there. She's a professional organizer. Woo! She's a professional organizer, and the O in my community, O in core, is organization. So I brought her on to speak to our community. And I thought, this is so amazing that I am going to continue doing these expert interviews. And one of the most important experts in my life is sitting to the right of me, right here. And it's Susan Ford Collins. She is my life coach. She is an author of The Joy of Success and Our Children Are Watching. Yeah.
Work together.
Her book has been published in like 29 languages. She's absolutely incredible, and she is my dear friend. She's been a huge role in my life. So I brought her for Connect with Caro. And then we thought, 2021 is ending. We started this community in the midst of COVID, when everything was virtual. And we thought, this is an opportunity to do something in person, to do something live in the flesh where we can connect with each other. And when we decided on that, I thought, who better to do this with than you? Oh, we got to turn you on. It is on. Okay. It's not on. It's not on, guys.
I got one of my early morning calls from Caro. You know, if I'm walking around 7 o'clock or 10 of 7 and the phone rings, it's this one. So we cooked this up early. And we have the same birthday.
Yesterday was our birthday. Yeah, so this is our birthday celebration.
Yep. So I get to turn the tables tonight. I'm going to interview her. Usually she's the one doing all the interviewing, but we thought it would be fun if we just kind of flipped it over on its edge. So I want to know, and I really want to know this, how did you get into core? I knew you other ways. I knew you as a mother. I knew you as a lawyer. I knew you as a speaker, as your father's daughter, as the keeper of his wisdom. But how'd you get to core?
That's a really good question.
I thought it was. I even wrote you and emailed you. I was going to ask.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but there was a moment in time when I was doing my speaking, and I was speaking with organizations and corporations, and I was looking for a way to fit all of my content, because we had all these beautiful stories.
Right.
And I was training for the marathon, and my knee started hurting, and a friend of mine invited me to go to Pilates. She's here too, Frances. So she offered that I go to Pilates. I take a Pilates class, and all of a sudden, my back pain is gone. And I had no idea what Pilates did that was so powerful. So I went to track the next day, and I was running with an Ironman, and I said to him, man, my back is not hurting anymore, I'm doing great. And he said, well, that's because you are working out your core. And when you are down and out, what keeps you going is the strength of your core. Now, CORE is an acronym, and it's an acronym for enduring principles that everyone here knows. Clarity, organization, resilience, emotional intelligence. They're all words that we've heard. But when you put them together in a formula, in a methodology, then it gives us a pathway to be able to achieve our goals. And that's really how CORE was born. But it wasn't until COVID hit
Yes.
that I looked around and I saw that there was an opportunity to help women. Because what I saw was that we were over drinking, we were overeating, we were feeling isolated, which you know a lot
Right.
about.
Oh, yes.
A lot of people weren't having healthy habits at all. And they weren't feeling connected, they were feeling isolated, and they weren't feeling protected. So we started these challenges as a way to put these women in a safe space where they could develop some healthy habits and get inspired to get up in the morning and go for a walk or...
And accountability and people cheering them on.
Yes.
I mean, it's so powerful. We don't have cheerleaders like we used to when we were in school. And it's so important.
Tell them about being your own cheerleader.
I just think that's really important, to take time every day to say, what did I do today that was a success? From my point of view, not necessarily you would agree with it, but what was the next step for me? And I think that very often we just kind of ooze through life and we don't look back and say, hey, I accomplished a lot. And I was talking to Rosemary, and she was saying that she has a habit of doing that, looking back at the end of the year, and we're coming up on that, and saying, what did I accomplish? I am powerful. And I think doing that in a group like CORE is just astounding. I started my career doing public seminars all over the place. And the energy that would happen in 2 days of working with these people was life-changing. And they stayed in touch forever. So having a CORE group to deal with your core is brilliant.
Thank you. I agree.
Now can we talk about your book?
Yes, we can.
See, because when I met her, she was still trying to write her father's book. And she was stuck. And I said, you're stuck because you've got to write your book. Yeah, what a concept. Our dreams, our life, our book. So then she went on this crazy, wacky trip that from looking over the edge. And she came back and she's like, blah, 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 and her energy's sky high, and there's wonderful stories. And I said, honey, that's your book. You've got to write it. And you did.
I did.
And there's some key players here.
That's right. Actually, who's read Looking Over the Edge? Oh, a bunch of you.
Especially your child.
Okay, so Looking Over the Edge is a true story. It's a story about...
See, it cuts in and out.
It's a story... We're switching again. It's a true story about a spontaneous vacation that my children and my husband and I went on when my husband insisted that we take a spontaneous vacation with 3 kids under the age of 7, guys. Yes. Let's do a spontaneous vacation. Fun!
Spontaneous, except she had to get ready and
Yeah.
do all the packing and the organizing. So
Yeah.
it was spontaneous for them. It wasn't so spontaneous for her.
Exactly. So we take this trip, and the trip was going great. But on the very last day of the trip, it was New Year's Eve, we were on our way up a mountain, and we lost control of our car. There was icy roads. It was snowing unexpectedly. We were in Asheville, not wanting it to snow. We had gone there specifically to avoid the
Yeah,
snow.
but you're not telling the whole deal. See, you had a son here who was very powerful. Which one? Point to him.
Orly.
Orly kept saying, uh-oh, switch. It's gonna snow. It's gonna snow. It's gonna snow. And the parents were no, it's not. The weather forecast said, no, it's not. Guess what? It snowed.
It did. It did. And he's so powerful and manifested the snow and almost killed us in the process. So we were driving up this mountain.
But it became a book.
But it became a book. So we were driving up this mountain and we lost control of the car. And we ended up having to make the decision to abandon the car and hike up 3 miles to safety at our cabin. And the spoiler alert is that we all survived. Another beautiful part of the story is that we had met friends that were there, Annalyn and Chris, and they had invited us to go to their cabin. And the reason we almost fell off the mountain was because we were driving up to go to the cabin with them. And they got stuck at the bottom of the mountain. And they were not able to drive up or hike up. And they got picked up by a bunch of banjo makers, okay? And spent the night, not a bunch, a couple. It was a couple that were banjo makers. And they spent the night. And something that's really cool about tonight is that they're here. Do you guys want to meet the actual Chris and Annalyn from the book? Guys, stand up. Come up here. And where's Chris and Nicholas? Where are they? Come up here for a minute. So these are our family friends. We'd gone on this trip. They had no idea that we were going up on the trip, and we had no idea that they were going on that trip. And we found ourselves in downtown Asheville, in the middle of the street. And they invited us up to their cabin to spend New Year's Eve. We thought we were going to spend New Year's Eve together, but we did not.
And they had hotel reservations, which got scratched along the way.
We had the hotel reservation. So our story happened with them. They ended up at the bottom of the mountain. We ended up at the top of the mountain. And incredibly, the lessons that we learned, both were very parallel because it showed, and the book talks about this, it showed how the decisions that you have to make as a parent, as a spouse, as a family. How are you going to climb your mountain? What are you going to do when you're looking over the edge? How are you going to stay safe? What decisions are you going to make? How are you going to talk to your kids about it? You guys can go back and sit down. Can we get a round of applause for them?
Yay!
They're famous.
And I wanted to add one other thing here because it was really important. There was a lot of fear in this.
There was a lot of fear.
And facing fears is a very important skill. And so this story tells a lot about how, as a family, they climbed, a distance they didn't know how far it was or how hard it was going to be, and dealing with the fears and encouraging each other. And the leadership was just amazing as a family.
Chris and I were having an argument on our way back down from the trip because he was saying, you guys got the raw end of the deal. You guys had to climb up in the snow. And I'm like, no, we didn't. You got the raw end of the deal. You had to sleep in the banjo maker's house. We had a great New Year's Eve. We had steak, and we got in the hot tub. It was fantastic after we made it. And we had this argument, but the truth is that neither of us got the raw end of the deal because everything we needed happened for both of us.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we learned in the book is that there's no right answers. Sometimes you're going to climb, and sometimes you're going to stay at the bottom of the mountain. And neither are right or wrong. It's what matters for your family. And I think COVID has taught us a lot about that too.
One other thing that I thought was important from this story is your husband, Orlando, stepped up and was a hero. And not just to the family, but to the people who were stuck on the side of the road, to the woman who didn't have the courage to drive or back up or move. She was frozen in her space. And she had everybody else blocked. And it was because of him that she was able to move.
It's true.
Talking to her father, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And getting her to say, okay, I'm going to move. And we get frozen in life sometimes. And it's really important to be able to move, do something different so we can get some feedback from the universe.
Yeah, and it gave me the opportunity to see him in that light.
Hero.
Also. in the hero leader light. You're my hero, sweetheart. You're amazing. So that's a beautiful. I love that story.
Yeah, I love the whole story.
Yeah.
But what I really am amazed at, as I think back now, is what you've done since. I mean, that book kind of gave you the courage to go much further in your career.
Well, you said something at the beginning, which was I was trying to write my father's book.
Yes.
And so my father passed away a few years ago, and my father was a motivational speaker. I'm actually an attorney, and I was practicing law when my father passed away. And I knew that I wanted to keep his legacy alive.
Okay, but wait, you're underselling it. Because he was an international best-selling author and speaker. like famous in Japan, like traveled all the time. She had a lot to live up to. And yeah, I think that was like an anchor holding her back. And she had to get to the point where she could honor her father but not slow her own life down. That was important.
It is, and it's interesting that you should say that because people would probably think that because my father was my father, I'd have more opportunity and more leverage to be able to move into that space. But actually, it caused me a lot more fear.
Yes.
Because I had these shoes that I had to step into. I kept thinking to myself, like, I can never fill this man's shoes.
Self-judgment. You know, sometimes we judge ourselves. When we're doing well, we say we're not doing well, and it keeps us stuck in place. And she had put on such big boots that there was no way to walk in them, you know? Switch. So she had to let go of that to be able to take the next step.
So, that's when Bruce, one day, I was talking to him about something, and he says, you really need to go see Susan. And I said, I don't need to go see Susan. I'm surrounded by personal development. I am the queen of personal development. I've been doing it since I was 7 years old. And he said, you need to go see Susan. So I did. And when I got there and I asked her, she asked me, why are you here? I literally said,
I don't know.
I don't know. But we worked together, and I was writing my dad's book, and could not get through it. I really couldn't get through it.
Yeah, that's it. You see, we create so much resistance that we can't get to the places we want to go because we're up there saying, it's not right, it's not good enough, it's not. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we worked on that. We worked on me becoming my own person. In fact, one of the things that we discovered during that time was that Susan and my father were running in the same circles. My father had been in Korea, was famous in Korea. She was big in Japan. My father wrote his book. She wrote her book. They were published in multiple languages. They're both part of this same forum. They ran on all these circles.
Met him.
And she'd never met him.
Hard to believe.
Hard to believe. In fact, Bruce said, I want you to go see Susan. She's a friend of your dad's. And when I came to you, you're like, I don't know him. And
well, but let me fill in there because I took a couple of years off and went to China to coach. So it was during the time I was in China that he was in the Strategic Forum.
Right.
So we just kind of missed each other in the process.
So one day we sat down and she said, well, I know why I didn't meet your father. And I said, why? And she said, because everyone knows you as your father's daughter. But it's time that people start to know him as Caroline de Posada's father.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes the hair stand up.
And thank you, Susan, because you helped me step into that space. I really appreciate it.
You did it beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautifully.
So I came home and I said I'd had this experience, and I told Susan about it. I'd first told Dave about it. Dave is my editor. He's here, Dave Bricker. He's one of our experts as well. If you guys haven't, if you're in the core community and you haven't listened to the Connect with Caro episode on Dave Bricker, it's a must listen to. So we were having a conversation, and I told him about the story, and he said, you need to write this down. And he was the one that planted that seed in my head. And then I went to Susan the next week, and I said, Dave said that I should write it down. She said, well, Dave's right. And I said, but I feel like I'm betraying my dad. Because if I don't finish that project, then what will that say about that story? If I don't finish that, and we all do this. If you have a project or a business or something that you've started and then you abandon it, then you have failed that project, right? In your eyes, you've failed that project. And I was afraid to not only fail the project of being an author, but I was afraid of failing the project of being the person who was going to celebrate my father's legacy. And Susan looked at me and said, when there's energy, ride the wave. You've got to ride the momentum.
You know, she came in and she's telling the story, and we did this, and then this happened, and this happened. It's like, that was clearly a wave.
Yeah.
And she's wanting to go back to this story that we've gone over and over and over, and we pieced it together 87,000 different ways, and it just wasn't fitting. And here she is like, blah, 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 blah. Go with it. Where there's energy, go with it. And so often we don't do that. We don't do the things we love, and then we don't have the power that we deserve to have, and it's internal to us.
Yeah. So I had to embrace that, and I did, and I
Very
obeyed,
well.
because I am obedient. I am obedient.
I wouldn't agree with that.
And so we started writing the book, and that's how Looking Over the Edge was born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's exciting because, see, all of a sudden I was looking at Carol. I was looking at Caroline. I was not looking at anybody's daughter or anybody's student. I was looking at a full-blown person who had loves and desires and talents. And it was so exciting. I just can't help but fall in love with that. You know, it's so attractive. So what's next? I know. I guess it must be time for me to talk because you can't talk. I can't talk. Well, let me tell a little bit of my story. Yeah. The universe stepped in there, right?
And we can talk about resilience and COVID.
Yes. I'm writing a new book, and it has a strange title, but I think you'll relate once I give you the context. It's called Blur. And I got into Blur because I went through a period of time where, one, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. 2 weeks later, my sister was diagnosed with cancer. A year later, my daughter had a cancer. A year after that, Albert died, and a year after that, my sister died.
And Albert is your husband.
Yeah. And I was in Blur. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. I could not think my way out of a paper bag. I was afraid to drive, and I'm courageous. I mean, like, I can do anything except when I'm in Blur. And so why I thought it was important to write this book now was to tell that story and to help people who are in Blur because of COVID. You know, like a lot of our habits and a lot of the fun things in life, whether it's the holidays or dinners or people coming over or hugging your best friends, they've been snatched away from us. And emotionally, we're like disconnected. We're kind of floating. A lot of people that I talk to, when I say I'm writing a book about Blur, they went, I need a copy, I'm in Blur. And so that's what I'm doing. And I'm telling this story about all this pain that I went through and how I'd get lost and I couldn't find my way out of the parking lot, or the night I parked my car and I came out from seeing Albert and they had locked my car in and put an iron gate up and I couldn't get my car. I mean, all of this stuff. And then the second half of the book is about COVID and how it's doing it to us and what we can do about it.
One of the things that inspired us to have this conversation in front of you guys is the theory of connecting the dots. So when we were piecing together Looking Over the Edge and also working together, there was a lot of connecting the dots. And we talk about that with success filing all the time. You document your successes, you write what goes on in your day so that you can create a memory of what has happened. I always say there's 3 times that you live an experience. You live it in the present when you go through it, you live it in the past when you remember it, and Susan taught me you live it in the future when you visualize it. Right? So there's these 3 moments that you live an experience, but sometimes they tell you, well, forget the past. The past doesn't matter. Ignore the past, move on, because the past is painful, because the past is terrible, because you would rather forget your mistakes or whatever regrets you have and forget that person. But that past makes us who we are today. It's one of the biggest things of Looking Over the Edge is you're in training for something bigger. And it helps us, we are training for something bigger based on what we went through in our past. So when Susan's talking about Blur, she says, well, what I'm doing is I'm just connecting the dots. I'm connecting the dots on everything that happened because I barely remember.
And it's the subtitle, the subtitle of the book is The Way Out of Blur is remembering, not forgetting. You know, we have a tendency to want to forget the painful things, but what I learned in this process was I had to remember it. I had to go through every diary, every book, every note, my schedule, emails, everything, and piece it all back together before it settled in place. Otherwise, it haunted me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I couldn't remember. A terrible place to be. Blur is just absolutely disempowering.
Part of the beauty of connecting the dots is that you tap into your resilience. And with resilience, one of the most beautiful aspects of resilience is we think that resilience is something that we have to create. We have to generate resilience. We have to become resilient. We have to hang around people that will make us resilient. But the truth is that we were born resilient. Resilience is something not that you create, it's something that you tap into. And how do you tap into it? Now that's the secret. Because when you're born, it's sink or swim, right? When you are born, you have to survive. So you have to learn how to walk, how to talk, how to eat, how to smile, how to cry, how to communicate in words. You have to learn everything from scratch. And we forget how hard it was. I remember when my little boys were learning how to ride bike. How many times did they fall off that bike? Thousands. If I fell off the bike one time trying to ride, now at 40, I'd be like, it's over. I can't do it. I'm gonna kill myself out there. I can't ride bike. We quit too soon. So, but little kids, babies, little kids, they fall and they get back up. They cry, they shake it off, they get back up. They're tapping into a resilience that they are born with, that is innate in them. And then somewhere along the way, it's almost beat out of us. It's like taken out of us because things become easier and life becomes easier. And we have all these basic functions that we all take for granted. And we have comforts like crazy. We have hot water and light and electricity and food and abundance, and we're living in the most abundant times ever. And we have so much of that, and we're comfortable. So we have comfort, we have learned skills that we've already learned, and then add on to that limiting beliefs. And it just becomes this impossible thing to tap into that one strength that we had, which is the R in core, resilience. Yeah. So when we were talking about this and we're talking about Blur, one of the things I most admired about Susan is all that she went through. And this is why I always say I want to be like Susan when I grow up. And then we find out we have the same birthday. I mean, how amazing is that? I mean, talk about synchronicity. One of the things that I saw her go through was tapping into that resilience when Albert passed away and when all these things happened to her. I saw her do that. And one of the ways of doing it is connecting those dots. That was
very important. I couldn't do it unless I had done that process. And so I said to myself, I got to explain this to people because we live in a society that wants us to put things aside. Well, tough, we can't. Our body won't do it. Our body and mind relate to earlier similars all the time. Earlier similars, this is just like, this feels just like. In fact, driving over here, Caroline had picked me up in an Uber. I was driving the route that I had taken Albert to for chemo over and over and over. Boom, it was up in my awareness again. But I've done so much work that I went, oh, okay, I remember that, but it didn't do me in. And in the early days, it would do me in. That's just how it was. The thing that's exciting and that I'm incorporating in this book is how resilient our society is and how there are people out there who've been working on projects that are now saving us. How many of you know what a nautilus shell is? Have you seen that shell that goes around and around and around? And we love those shells. We'll spend a lot of money. They're beautiful, pearlescent inside. Do you realize there's a squishy, little, unnoticed creature that has created all those chambers, one after the other, season after season after season. And I think what's happened is all of a sudden we're going, oh, I have a squishy little creature inside of me, and it's lonely. You know, it likes to touch the walls. It likes to touch the other cells. It likes to be out there. And so, in a way, Zoom is going to do us a favor, I think, ultimately. It's going to make us appreciate each other more. And I see that. I see tonight, just being in this room with you, how exciting it is when you see somebody that you know and you love, and it's like, thrilling.
Something I want to share is about habits, because that's something that you and we talk about a lot. We have this in common. It's one of the things that attracted me to you so much. No. Well, I turned it off.
Am I on now? Good.
So for me, eating healthy is a priority. Exercise is a priority. If you guys are familiar with our core program, we're going to have to turn it off. Yeah. If you're familiar with our core program, we focus on mindset, on wellness, on relationships. Those are the 3 pillars of everything that is core. And being healthy is one of them. But it's not being healthy because we are focused on having a beach bod, which is important for some people, but not for everybody. And it's really more about just having habits that drive success. And when I was writing Looking Over the Edge, one of the things that I was thinking about doing was running a marathon. I wanted to run a marathon. I had run one before, and I wanted to run one again. And Susan sat with me and said, do you really have the bandwidth to be a mom and train for a marathon and write a book? Do you have the bandwidth to do that? And we have a lot of moms here, and we all try to do that, right? Like, we want to do everything, and we want that season. And you were talking about seasons with that shell. We all have these seasons, and we want to do everything right now. We want to build the empire. We want to have a great body. We want to get enough sleep. We want to raise our kids and be present and have family time. We want to write the book. We want to do it all. And then we want to train for the marathon. And that is the marathon. So we're having this conversation, and she said, do you really have the bandwidth to do that? And I had to make a decision at that point that, no, I didn't. If I was going to wake up at 4 a.m, it was going to be to write up my book. It wasn't going to be to train for a marathon. And I couldn't do both. And habits was one of those things that we were working on. So the mistake would have been at the time to say, well, I'm going to abandon the marathon, so then I'm just going to eat whatever I want. I'm not going to eat healthy. I'm not going to exercise. I'm not going to do anything because I'm not in that season. I'm going to wait until I'm done with the book. But one thing I really admire about you is that you maintain your healthy habits all throughout, no matter what. And it inspired me also to maintain my healthy habits no matter what. So talk a little bit.
Well, if health is it, you know, having been through this season of my life with so many illnesses and cancers and death, I really see that if we don't have health, we don't have anything. And so slowing down in this COVID time, I think it's been important for us to say, what are our priorities? And, you know, one of the things about the guy who started Instacart was he hated going to the grocery store. So he said, let me figure out a way that I can help people go to the grocery store without getting in their car. And then COVID came, and it became essential. So I think it's important to realize what you don't like and then find other people to help you do that, or invent ways to help other people do that. It's the key to success. I keep telling my grandson, who's working very hard in a corporation out on the West Coast, that he needs to invent something that'll really do some good, because that's the way to really establish himself. I mean, this guy, Juan, who created Zoom, is like $11 billion now. That was being in the right place at the right time with the right technology. Yeah. So resilience. As a society, we're pretty resilient because we have these oddball techies that are already thinking of these things in advance, and then, boom, like magic, like mushrooms, they pop up at just the right time. So that's important too. Where do we go from here? Well, do we have questions of the group? Okay.
Does anybody have a question you guys want to ask? Yeah. She wants to know why I said that I wanted to be like Susan when I grew up. So the reason I want to be like Susan when I grow up is because she's a little bit older than me. We share a birthday, but she's just a little bit older than me. And she embodies the kind of person that I want to be when I'm older. A person that seeks health, that has healthy habits. She walks like 7 miles every day, right? She eats healthy foods whenever I would go to her house. Something I pride myself on, and a lot of my clients know this because I do these walking sessions with my clients. And oftentimes they'll come to my house and I make them meals and then we walk together. And it's because I want to teach them how easy it is to prepare meals. And she does that with me too. One of the greatest things about when we met was she offered me lunch and I was like, oh God, I wonder what we're gonna eat. And it was like this beautiful, healthy meal. And I was like, I found my person. She's my person. So she eats well, and she continues to have passion and purpose. So no matter how old she is, no matter what career or what stage in life her career is or anything, she has grandchildren now. She's in a completely different stage in her life, but she is still finding purpose. She's writing another book. She helped me get through Looking Over the Edge. She's awesome. You're just awesome.
Well, it goes to resilience. We've been given this amazing machine, and I respect it as not just a machine with mechanical parts, but this body, this mind, this nervous system, this taste system, this ability to remember and to make up stuff. We can make up the next chapter of our lives or the next chapter of our society after COVID. It's amazing. And sometimes we forget how magical we are.
Well, I love that you said magic because I love magic. We are in the season of magic right now. I mean, we are in December. You look around and it's all, magical, but magic is more than lights. When I started this journey of becoming a speaker when I lost my father, one of the things that I had to do was tap into my spirituality. And spirituality is a weird thing because I'm not a religious person, and my father raised me to be a critical thinker. So I used to think, and not a magical thinker, and it was like a critical thinker is a person that studies science and has explanations for everything, and a magical thinker is, well, everyone else. And I had that upbringing growing up. But when I lost my father, I started to find all these synchronicities and these mysteries and this magic that was happening in my life. All these things that would happen to me that would show me that my father was very, very present in my world and that I was being guided in a direction, that I was going in a direction. Susan helped me a lot with that, to see that. And I'm very grateful for that because it opened up my world and it really culminated in Looking Over the Edge. Because when we were on that mountain and we almost fell off and we had to hike up those 3 miles and we had to embrace that fear and we had to find our way, and everything that happened is no different, by the way, than when you guys are going through now. It's absolutely no different. You might not be at the edge of a mountain, but you are at the edge, most definitely, of a pandemic, which is a very difficult time to go through. And some people are embracing a lot of fear. And it was in that moment, in going through that, and then connecting the dots of everything that had happened and everything that I had grown up with and all the tools in my toolbox that led me to that moment where we were climbing, even down to the man I married and the kids that were born to me, everything, and the friends who I met along the way, every part of that was magical. We found our magic.
Training, you said that. Talk a little bit more about that and maybe how that might be highlighted in the book.
So I talk about we're always in training for something bigger. And what I mean by that is that the experiences that we go through in our life are literally training us for something. And I discovered that on that mountain that day. Because the day before, we had been going on a hike with my husband and my kids, and guys, I don't mean to call you out, but I'm going to. They were totally obnoxious on that trip. They were driving us crazy. They didn't want to climb up the mountain. They didn't want to go up, and they were giving us this really hard time. And my husband was following his intuition and his gut, and he was like, they have to finish this climb. But the Rodriguez brothers are not quitters. We're leaders. You gotta hike up this mountain. And he was giving them a pep talk, and he was reciting Shakespeare. He was putting them on his shoulders. And I was like, when did this man become Tony Robbins? He never wants to climb mountains, ever. He never wants to climb mountains, but he insisted on that mountain that day. And he's like, this is gonna serve them as a lesson one day. It was the day before. And he made them do it. And when we got there, there was a waterfall. We were finding this waterfall, and he's like, you're going to remember this waterfall. One day you're going to need this waterfall. Your parents aren't always going to be around for you. And when you're down and out, you're going to remember that waterfall. And it was like this whole thing. And then the very next day, we were stuck on the side of the mountain. And he walked up to the window, and he opened the door, and he said, guys, do you remember that hike that we did yesterday? We've got a new waterfall. We got to hike up this mountain. And you know that you can do it because you've done it before. And that's how we made that decision. And I thought, well, sometimes these lessons that are so beautifully packaged into this book happen 20 years from now, but sometimes they happen tomorrow. And that was a tomorrow kind of day. That was training us for that. But it goes more than that, because think about the high school you went to, the friend that you had in elementary school. I know people that have come here from Cuba, for example, and then they studied with someone in elementary school in Cuba, and then all of a sudden they find them 50 years later. They find each other. Oh, I didn't even do that on purpose. We have two that did that happened to right here. And they find each other, and there was a purpose in their life. They're serving each other now, but they met all those years later, and it's not a linear experience, but that experience was a tool in the toolbox that's training you for now. It's one of the things that we have to look back. It's why connecting the dots matters so much. It's why we have to remember. And all those experiences is how we embrace the magic. That is where we find the magic. And you helped me with that when I was writing my book, because I would tell you these stories about what was going on, and you would be like, that's magic. That's magic. That's synchronicity. That's magic. You have to experience that. But the only way that you can experience it is by looking in the past. So that's what I meant by you're in training for something bigger. Yes.
Are you going to continue writing your book about your dad?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that yet. I don't know.
If you do, you should write about like Susan.
That's a good point.
Mom, can you describe the handsome young man that made it snow? More and more, please.
I'm not going to describe him. The persistent.
Pain in the butt, young man. You kept asking over and over and over.
I'm not going to describe him.
Are we there yet? Kids do this all the time. Wonderful.
What I will say is that when we were almost at the top of the mountain, we'd gone through all this, Orlando looks at me and he said, no one's ever going to believe what we went through. No one is going to believe what we went through on this mountain. And Orly looks at us and goes, what no one's going to believe is that that an 11-year-old made it snow.
I want to add one other thing. It reminds me of the space I was in. Can you hand me that? Okay, I don't want it to fall. This is the key here. Our children are watching. And what Orlando did with the boys that day, they will remember forever. And what her dad did for her growing up and her mom did for her growing up is an integral part of who they are today. And I know that because today it thundered. Now that may not sound like a big deal to you, but it seems to always thunder when her dad is in her consciousness. When he steps in, when he's with her, it thunders. And there's an example in the book, and there was an example today. Yeah, I do.
All right. I wasn't going to share this story. So yesterday was my birthday, as you guys know, and Betsy, my dear friend and soul sister, took me on a surprise date. We went for a bike ride, and we got to the bottom of where we were bike riding. There was a picnic, and my girlfriends were there with me, and we were going to do a meditation. And it was beautiful, clear skies. It was these beautiful blue skies. And in the middle of the meditation, Betsy says, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's set our intention today for Caro. And it thundered. And I opened my eyes and I looked around, looking for the rain, because I thought it was going to mess up the bike ride, but there was no rain. There was no clouds, there was no rain, but there was a thunder in that day. Now, for those of you that haven't read the book, my father was very sick, and when he passed away, I was sleeping in a cot right next to his bed. And the way that I discovered that he was gone was there was a huge, loud thunder at 2:30 in the morning, and before I opened my eyes, I knew he was gone. It was like an alert. It was like someone had told me, we're taking him. And it thundered in that moment, and I said, you know what? That was my sign, and from this day forward, whenever it thunders, we're not gonna cry because the thunder took him. We're gonna take it as his hello. So whenever it thunders, I tell my kids, say hi to Papa, say hi to Papa. And we always make it this thing that it's gonna thunder. But I cannot say that it's really my dad that's making it thunder. Because there's no science to prove that there's no evidence of that. And I would never sit here and say, I could say right now, it would be really cool if it would thunder right now, and it's not going to. Because we can't make these things happen. But what we can do is find magic in our lives. And we can decide how we connect to the signs we see, whether they're true or they're not. So yesterday, I was on that picnic, and it thundered, and I felt my dad. And maybe it had nothing to do with him, and maybe it was a coincidence, and maybe it's not true, but it's my truth. And that's what you guys have to decide. Yes, Daisy. Can you give her the mic?
For those that are meeting Caro for the first time, I happen to have been there yesterday. And ever since the day I met her, when you're with people who feel the magic, you do too. Because I was there, and when I heard the thunder, there was not a cloud in the sky. I don't know if you all enjoyed the beautiful Miami weather yesterday. I actually opened my eyes because I was like, there's no way. There was no cloud. And I heard the thunder more clear. I'm only confirming her story because it could be something that she feels, as she just said, because it's her father and there's a special connection there. But I was there, and every time I'm with Caro, I feel the magic. So what I'm encouraging you all that came here today, both Susan and Caro have the magic. And if you want to feel it, read their book and hang out with them because you get it.
Well, thank you. Spoken like a true core sister. This is one of our core sisters, and one of the beautiful things about our community is that, and they said this in Luli. Our friend Luli B just had an event. She was here a little while ago, but she had to leave. But she had an event, and she said that we find each other, and we come together in these spaces for a reason. We find each other for a reason. And if this doesn't work for you, or you don't want to find the magic, or you don't want to read Looking Over the Edge, or you don't believe that you can tap into your resilience, chances are that you wouldn't have landed in this room. I mean, unless you knew me from a long time ago, but we're not going to talk about that. But we come together, and that's what's the beauty of CORE. That CORE is clarity, organization, resilience, emotional intelligence. It's just 4 principles. That's it. 4 principles that you can apply in your life. But what it really is the community that surrounds those principles. It's that the people that want to live by those principles found each other. They find each other, they come together, they inspire each other, they hold each other accountable, they work together, and then they spread magic. And I feel that's what happened to me with Susan. I wouldn't have found Susan if I didn't need her, but I needed her at that time, and I found her. And then you guys found me through CORE. So it's kind of great.
You know, and we pass it on. You have a powerful experience. He said, let me tell you about this. Let me share this with you. And we introduce each other to each other. It's magical. You know, I think that we forget how interconnected we are and how we sense things. And we're there for each other in very powerful ways. Hopefully, COVID is going to let us see that we can come back from anything. We can, and we can do it together even more powerfully.
We're coming to an end. Yeah. So our Connect with Caros, and I always say this on our Zoom calls, I'm like, we want to honor your time. And our event is from 5:30 to 7:30, but we said we'd do 1 hour of interviews, so we are coming up to our time. We've got 3 minutes. So if you guys want to read Looking Over the Edge and purchase it for your family members, we have our books up in the front. They are $20 today. And the reason that they're $20 is because how beautiful is this space? Guys, is this space beautiful? Well, this space was given to us by the Mom Economy. The Mom Economy is a nonprofit organization that is supporting local moms in their businesses. And they offer this space so that moms can come together and do these kinds of things, workshops, sell jewelry, showcase their products, all these beautiful things. So we made the book a little bit more expensive than you can get it on Amazon, but that is because 50% of the proceeds is going to Mom Economy today as a thank you for hosting us together. So we hope you guys will buy the Looking Over the Edge books because you'll be donating to Mom Economy for Christmas. And we invite you guys to join our CORE community. We have a beautiful community, a beautiful space, and we come together to hold each other accountable, not to judge each other, but to build ourselves up, to focus on all things mindset, wellness, and relationships, and find connection in a time when we really need connection. So thank you, Susan, for being here.
She's wonderful. You know, in life, every once in a while you meet someone who's so crystalline and so brilliant and so sparkling that like your life is different because of that connection. She's one of those. There's a couple of others here, but I know there are a lot more. I just may not know that yet about you. But it's more than connection. It is that magic element.